Just when one Gallatin County man thought things couldn't get any worse, he discovered his storage unit was broken into. I'm Annie Johnson, and I'll have the full story coming up.
I'm Mike Dennison at the Capitol. The field for the 2020 governor's race is now complete. Coming up, I'll have the details.
Just ahead of 6:30 back here in Montana this morning, Chet Lehman, Matt Elwell, and it's a windy day out there, but it is a little warm, which is nice.
It feels nice until you step out into the wind, then you kind of have
Bad
to get. I only had to chase my trash can. It knocked it over and kind of pushed it over. I blame my kids, but I think it was the wind.
We'll never know for sure.
Yeah, you'll never know.
We'll never know. They're not going to say a thing.
Yeah,
no, they're never gonna
temperatures,
know.
as you said, fairly mild early on, into the 40s, 38 in Butte, 23 in West Yellowstone. Current visibility starting to go up in West Yellowstone. The snow has tapered off. It does look like we're going to be dealing with a little bit of cloud cover early on, but by the afternoon, more sunshine. We do have a couple of spotty showers in parts of the area this morning. Shouldn't be a big issue for drivers. The wind's going to be a bigger issue as you move throughout the day. Daytime highs into the 40s. Plenty of sunshine as we wrap up your work day. It looks like our temperatures will continue to climb this week. We'll talk about that, of course, coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. Now it is 6:30. Storage units in Gallatin County have been the target of burglars during the last month.
MTN's Annie Johnson spoke with one of the victims who says this couldn't have happened at a worse time for him and his family.
Storage units seem like the ideal place to safely store a person's things. But for Tim Schober, his worst fears happened.
I had just picked up my two girls from school, pull up to the storage unit, and there's no lock on the unit.
And as Schober expected, something was wrong.
So I'm opening up expecting to see just an empty storage unit, but instead everything is just trash, just everything tossed everywhere.
He quickly noticed things were missing.
Oscilloscopes and electronics and radios and speakers and just all the high dollar stuff gone.
Tim says the worst part about this entire incident is the fact that his daughters were right there when he discovered the break-ins.
They were with me and they saw my frustration and my reaction.
Schober says the break-in affects more than just him and his family.
Some of the things that were stolen actually belong to a nonprofit organization that I belong to. All of my search and rescue gear and my air search and rescue gear gone.
And for Schober, this couldn't have happened at a worse time.
It was overwhelming, as just with looking for work and for several months now and not finding it and having to close down the business. It's just one more thing, one more cut at the knees.
The Gallatin County Sheriff's Department said this was one of several reported break-ins within the last month. Reporting in Gallatin County, Annie Johnson, MTN News.
Meantime, police in Butte say a 36-year-old man is recovering in the hospital after being shot in the chest with a crossbow.
Yeah, police responded to a place on Silverboat Boulevard about 9 o'clock Friday evening to find the victim alive after being shot in the chest. Victim had pulled the arrow out of his own chest and was transported to St. James Healthcare. Been no arrest by police. They do have a person of interest they want to question.
6:32 now. Lawmakers across the country are taking a closer look at a controversial way to stop sex predators from reoffending.
Yeah, it turns out the concept of chemical castration isn't new to Montana. Here's MTN's Evie Schultz.
There are almost 2,700 people on Montana's sex offender registry, and their punishments vary from case to case. So when we started in on this story, something caught us by surprise. Turns out lawmakers have taken up the issue of chemical castration before. Chemical castration is controversial, and it's making recent headlines across the country. First in Alabama just last year, now in Tennessee. Currently, a total of 8 states and U.S. territories have some type of chemical castration law, using drugs to reduce recidivism in sex offenders. Turns out Montana does too, and it's been on the books for decades. Flash back more than 20 years. That's when former Democratic Representative Deb Cattell introduced a bill in 1997 calling for chemical treatment for certain sex offenders leaving prison paid for by the state.
For me to carry the bill, it had nothing to do with punishment. Nothing. This wasn't about punishing someone. This was about rehabilitation and public safety.
Cattell is a legal professor. She says she was thinking of some of her students in her online classes who had committed sex crimes. She also says the treatment was cheaper than incarceration.
Why wouldn't we give them the medical tools to make it more likely that they will not offend again.
The bill received broad bipartisan support, but faced a long road to becoming law, including a veto from then-Governor Mark Roscoe, a Republican. Through a veto override, it found its way into state code. Montana became the second state in the country to pass this type of law. More than 2 decades after the law was passed, we wanted to know, is anyone even using it? MTN Investigates checked with district courts across the state. Our investigation couldn't confirm a single case of an offender receiving this treatment. We also learned some providers with the Montana Sex Offender Treatment Association didn't even know the law existed. Nationwide, people who support the idea say it's about protecting the most vulnerable victims of sex crimes, children. But
research itself doesn't pan out that this could be used long term. So.
Critics say it's inhumane and doesn't work. In 1997, the American Civil Liberties Union of Montana opposed the law. They didn't want to be interviewed for this story. In a statement, they said, "Thank you for reaching out to us. Unfortunately, we must decline."
In the general public, when we see a child, for instance, get hurt, we say, well, whatever it's going to take to help not have that happen again.
Bowman Smelko is a licensed psychologist. He says chemical treatment for sex offenders is meant to severely cut back on or eliminate sex drive by reducing testosterone levels. But it's not that simple. The drug only works when people are currently taking it, and some of the potential side effects can turn offenders away from the idea.
Bone density loss, heart issues, gastrointestinal issues, the list goes on.
Under Montana law, depending on the number of offenses or severity of a crime, a judge can impose injections of a drug commonly known as Depo-Provera. It's a common form of birth control for women. Smelko says for men, it's not a cure.
A lot of offenders will not agree to do this. It becomes very difficult to coerce them to do that, even with a statute in place, such as Montana's law. I believe that it should be used judiciously. I think that it should be used with those offenders that biologically are driven to hurt children.
When we checked in with Cattell, she wondered why the treatment wasn't more widely applied. Do you still think it was a good idea?
I would say yes, because we haven't had the experiment of its use.
One key difference between Montana's law and the one passed in Alabama last year. In Alabama, the treatment is required for people convicted of certain sex crimes against anyone younger than 13. Montana's law gives judges the option based on the severity of the crime and the number of repeat offenses. For MTN Investigates, I'm Evelyn Schultz. Back to you.
6:37 now. We're going to shift gears just a little bit. U.S. Senator Steve Daines asking the federal government to delay enforcing real ID requirements as Montana authorities continue issuing real ID compliant cards.
Once enforcement begins, Montanans won't be able to board airplanes or enter some federal facilities with their state driver's license unless they get a real ID compliant license. Currently, enforcement is set to start October 1st. Daines' office announced yesterday that he had sent a letter to President Donald Trump asking for a 1-year extension. The letter said state officials are making strides to comply with that law, but that there would be a, quote, significant impact on business and travel if many Montanans haven't gotten real IDs by the deadline. The state has issued more than 50,000 real ID compliant cards so far. Regardless of whether there is an extension, leaders are asking anyone who wants a real ID to apply. Your passport or a passport card, which costs $30, also works to satisfy the real ID requirement.
In political news this morning, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Whitney Williams named her running mate yesterday.
And as MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison tells us, that likely completes the field for the closely watched governor's race.
Williams, who is one of 2 Democrats in the race, tapped Culbertson farmer Buzz Matlin as her running mate for lieutenant governor, saying he'll be a strong advocate for agriculture and rural Montana.
All across eastern Montana, families are struggling to afford the cost of prescription drugs, which are frankly immoral, and our rural schools are under constant threat of closure and consolidation.
Her announcement was the 3rd in 4 days of a gubernatorial running mate as the candidate filing deadline is just a week away. On Sunday evening, Republican Greg Gianforte named Great Falls attorney Kristen Juris as his running mate.
I wanted to find a partner who could really come side by side with me in Helena, because we have a lot of work to do. You know, our number one priority is bringing more good paying jobs to Montana, peeling back these regulations that get in the way of small business.
And on Friday, Democrat Mike Cooney chose House Minority Leader Casey Schreiner of Great Falls as his partner on the ballot. Schreiner gave folks a preview of how they'll go after Gianforte in the general election, if the two tickets end up as their party's respective nominees.
The people in this room and people all across the state know what will happen if Greg Gianforte and all the extremist Republican legislators he can buy control the governor's office. They will steal health care from Montanans. They will dismantle our public education system. They will privatize our public lands, and frankly, they'll bust our budget.
Primary voters will choose the Republican and Democratic nominee 3 months from Tuesday on June 2nd. On the Republican side, the Gianforte team has two primary opponents: Attorney General Tim Fox and his running mate, former State Representative John Knoke of Bozeman, and State Senator Al Olszewski of Kalispell, and running mate and fellow State Senator Kenneth Bogner of Miles City. There's also a Libertarian team running for governor, Kalispell businessman Lyman Bishop and his running mate John Nesper. The governor's chair is open because incumbent Governor Steve Bullock is barred by term limits from running again. Governor also is the only state office where the lead candidate must file with a running mate partner for lieutenant governor. Now the campaign sprint begins in what's probably the top election race in Montana this year. In our coverage, we'll be telling you more about these candidates, their plans, and where they stand on the big issues. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And a reminder, candidates for all state and local offices have until next Monday to file and get their name on the ballot.
And then the real work begins.
Yeah, and then, oh my gosh, I can't
Here
believe
we
we're
go.
already to another big election season.
It is rolling.
Oh, yes, it is. And so are we when Montana This Morning returns as the number of coronavirus cases continues to rise. Health officials say outbreaks are inevitable. That's next, but here's what's ahead on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, we'll look at concerns about the coronavirus among the elderly as the number of cases increases in the U.S. and the death toll rises. We also talk to a travel expert about how the virus could affect your vacation plans. Plus, we have team coverage across the country of the crucial Super Tuesday primaries. Senator Amy Klobuchar is in Studio 57 to tell us why she's endorsing Joe Biden after dropping out of the race. And first on CBS This Morning, as part of our Work in Progress series, we revealed the results of a new survey on the biggest challenges moms face in the workforce. We'll see you at 7.